I'm going to try to use perhaps not the whole 15 minutes, and the idea is to share with you in terms of estates on behalf of the university, how we have gone through the baseload consumption of energy, and that's probably now one of our main learnings from the COVID period. So what I'll do over the next few slides is just give you perhaps a starting point with a little bit of context in terms of where my conversation stands into the university response to climate emergency, and then after what we've found, witnessed, and how we're going to go about it. So definitely a learning point of start for us. As a matter of context, I'm hoping many of you have heard about the university the climate emergency declaration back in 2019. We spent the year of 2020 to identify how we can best respond to that, and the decision's been made and committee approved in a way that we want to go and talk about 5 themes beyond carbon. So of course we want to do the net zero carbon and supporting UK and Paris commitment and Paris climate change agreement. That's our first 2 pathways, but we also wanted to take the task further, which is progressing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, embedding sustainability in the curriculum, and talking about progressing our ecology and biodiversity. So today I think the conversation is very much on the first pathways, so the scope 1, 2, so that's the carbon emissions which are arising from use of energy. So on this one, we have of course seen, like many people, quite striking numbers coming to us straight from the day we went on lockdown. And the first successes, unfortunately, have been that consumption have been plummeted because lots of things, and pretty much the campus was closed in terms of no building being in occupation. And what we've seen is the numbers here are, think about the university spending about £10 million per year on its utilities. So that's electricity, gas, and water. And water is £1 million. So you can think about electricity and gas being, the share of £9 million. So we've been very significant changes. And the electricity consumption reduced by about 30%. So that was all very good until I'll show you the next slides. And also the things that we quickly realized is that we, to a degree, had time. I don't know if all the speakers will say the same, but we had time to look at things a little bit differently. So we found time, and because it was less activity, we had a lot more visibility on our meters, which we have plenty, to see what's expected, what's not expected, like a water leak and others. So you can see here energy and water wastage, more than £1,200 a day saved, because we could see that a consumption was happening where we would not expect any, of course, because people are away, a lot more easier to go and address, which is not the case when building is in occupation. So what we've done for ourselves at the scale of the university is certainly what I would encourage all of us to do at our domestic level. And it's those 2 little questions on the top right corner. Do you pay for what you use? Well, likely to be yes, as long as you can trust your energy supplier invoices, which you can check. But I'm pretty sure you pay for what you use. Now, do you ask yourself the question, do you pay for what you need? And this is where we have been thinking. We've been working for many years on what's called energy efficiency, and this is where we put the debate in terms of, are we really using only what we need, or are we just using whatever we feel like it's switched on and happy enough like this? So what we've been doing over the course of the lockdown is applying this principle to ourselves. So the 30% I mentioned before is this. So you can see on this chart, it just represents how much electricity, and it's only electricity, goes through the university meters on a day. And you can quite see weeks and weekends. You can see up to the lockdown, so you could say this is a baseline, and you can see during lockdown, which is much lower. So that's very good. It says that nothing's happening because we don't expect anything to happen. Where our questions arise, and I would encourage everybody to do the same as per previous slide, is Okay, but if the campus is empty, why is it not going to zero? Why is this blue, dark blue, up to 130,000 here, not much lower? And this is what we've been trying to understand, is how is it possible and why is it possible, or why is it required, because I'm sure some of it is definitely required, that the university electricity consumption doesn't follow our presence and activity pattern. It's because we have lots of systems which are left on all the time. It's because we have to have things which are kept up for backup, safety, monitoring. You can think about IT, you can think about security systems, you can think about security lighting, but we know that not all our practices are suitable for being switched off. It might be that you have some experiments running 24/7, or some equipment requires a high degree of stability, so they need to be kept on 24/7. Or we still have some, I think, areas in the university where computers needs to stay on because that's the only way to access them remotely, whereas there are other technologies available today and so on. So we start to identify, but what we are, and this is our learning, if you want, and this is what this slide talked about, updated processes, is that we are start to learn that we need more understanding of the user's needs and practices to be able to interpret meter readings. We have about 4,000 meters around the campus, so lots of data, but unless we know how that data is being used by the users, it's difficult to say it's too much or not enough. Once we know this, then we can apply exception reports, which we have about 300 across the university, and we use that to then trigger alarms, and this is our little flowchart here. So it's possible to have a much more closer look at monitoring efficient use of energy, but that requires learning and knowledge. And lockdown for this has been really good for us because we have been able to engage in those conversations with people. So sports center, a very good example. You can see the chart here, much different. This chart shows that there has been a very 70% drastic reduction in energy consumption. And this is because the sports hub is a recent building, and we have had a much greater engagement with the users and the construction company to know exactly what's behind each meter. So when we saw the lockdown coming, we have been able to engage with the users to know exactly what needs to be on, what can be turned off, and confirm to the users that this has resulted into actual energy savings. So that's where we'd like to go. This is what the lockdown has been able to tell us. So in this case, the lessons learned for us are probably those three boxes. We have to understand better the context, lots of data, but we don't necessarily know what each of us is doing in his laboratory and what needs to be there. We sometimes have lack of controls. We do still have some areas around the university which are older and perhaps not benefiting from same controls. And then after, of course, we need to have this engagement with the users to find out exactly what their needs and negotiate perhaps sometime if we can have flexibility, which perhaps is something that David wants to talk to us after. That's the end of my slide, I think. David, do you want to? Oh, sorry, I need to stop sharing my screen, I believe.
That's great. Yeah. While we're doing that, can I encourage people to put any questions into the chat so that we can ask those of our presenters when they've finished? Thanks.
So can I just confirm that there's a slide that says case study Warwick at the top?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. So I just want to put what Joel and the team at Estates have been doing into a little bit of context regarding our research programs, and I probably want to mention three. First of all is, there's a lot of really interesting work happening with Estates, and I think it's great that we've sort of linked that with what we're doing in terms of our research activities. So there's probably 3 research programs I'll talk about. One is this one, which is LOTNet, which is a program grant led out of engineering, involving collaboration with other universities and engineering in the business school and so on, which is looking at, you know, moving towards lower temperature heat networks. Because the idea is in the future is that our heat networks, and we've got a significant heat network on campus, they'll need to switch from having sort of gas-based CHP engines where you burn gas to make both heat and electricity into something that's much more sustainable, where it's recovering waste heat as well as generating heat, and it's moving towards having heat pumps dotted around the campus rather than one central solution. And so that program is working with estates to understand, well, how can we use the Warwick campus as a case study? You know, the university's worked out its energy and infrastructure strategy that focuses on reduce and decarbonize and smart. We've got a program working at the campus level that says, well, okay, increasing the on-site generation in terms of PV, heat pumps at campus level. So that's a major shift towards decarbonizing supply. Some of the stuff that Joel's talking about in terms of understanding individual buildings and what we can and can't do, that's appearing in a program called Smart Square, which has both a lower temperature heat network, but then much smarter use of electricity as well. And then the other thing we're including it into it is, you know, increasing use of electric vehicles and increasing PV and so on. So what is often called a multi-vectoral energy system. And so for me, the comment is, we've seen that on average campus went down by 30% in terms of its electricity use. I was one of the people who said, what, only 30%? And then understanding that, well, in some buildings we dropped it down by 70%, because what that's providing from a research perspective is a sense of the flexibility of the different assets on campus, so that if something happens over here, there's more demand here, that then we can flex down demand in other places. So we start moving towards this more integrated campus. And then a couple other programs which are really important from that is defining the standards of the buildings that we build and upgrading refurbishments that we do. And then also it requires a change in what estates do. They need to become a district system operator, i.e. somebody that actually pulls everything together at the campus level. So those are some of the sort of aspects where what we're doing at the Warwick campus is featuring in the research agenda, not just of the LOTNet program here, but also another program led out of WMG called RESO, the Regional Energy System Operator, where we're collaborating with Coventry City and a lot of other partners to say, well, okay, what of the experiences that we've had at campus can be replicated at a city scale in Coventry. And then the third program is something called Energy Rev, which is part of the government's industrial strategy, the program that looks to prosper from the energy revolution. And I'm part of the academic consortium in Energy Rev, where we're taking examples like the Warwick campus and understanding what that tells us in terms of managing smart local energy systems, as they're called. So those are the sort of points that I wanted to add. Yeah, I'll probably stop there and invite any questions to both Joel and I.